think at this point, I like to say directly to the members of our military and our intelligence community, the time is now where you must choose whether you honor your oath or your orders. And if you have courage, you already know the answer. But for the rest of you, lead, follower, get out of the way. Get out of the way.
This dude is quickly becoming my favorite person in this community. Matthew Brown, this is part 3 we're going to review here. Welcome back. I'm glad you tuned back in. We've been covering the Matthew Brown story, part 1 and part 2 that's been on the Jeremy Corbell podcast. Part 3 just dropped a couple days ago. I wanted to take my time and make sure we review the most shocking and eye-opening testimony that he's given to date. Some of this is really, really difficult to go through, and if it's true, which I have no reason to believe that it's not, if it's true, we all really need to start assessing what's going on around us and start asking questions, which is why he has become kind of a hero in my book. We're going to talk about the implications and what that means. We're also going to talk about hidden science, and was science diverted back in the 40s and 50s and taken kind of off the tracks because the government was concerned about maintaining secrecy and control over stuff that could cause problems for national defense. We're also going to get a summary on really what happened to the Stars Academy, TTS or TTSA, from a producer who was running in those circles and knew all those folks. It's really some great insight. On top of that, and something that keeps coming up that I really haven't delved into too much because I just don't know how I feel about it. We're going to get into it on this show. Are aliens demons? Is this non-human intelligence that we're hearing about, is this some kind of demonic entity? I don't know, but there are some very intelligent people out there that have some very strong opinions on the matter, including our own Pentagon. Stay tuned. We're going to get into all that. Let's let Matthew Brown continue here.
If you're a member of the public and you are still listening to CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, all of that is controlled. It's propaganda. It is shaping your life narrative, intentionally so.
At the end of 2001, I went through basic training. Of course, we all remember what happened towards the end of 2001, and that was my motivation for going in. When I was at AIT, Advanced Individual Training, learning my craft, learning my trade in the Army, I had a buddy who also went into PSYOPs, and we used to have lunch together quite often. A shocking thing he learned is essentially all the media, the news, all of it is one giant psychological operation. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details. What Matthew Brown is saying here is 100% the truth. There is a message that is always pushed, and that's something you should definitely pay attention to and read between the lines.
There's an infection in our security thinking, which is that, we must, they're primicists. They must be on top. To admit weakness is to admit defeat. And to say you don't know what something is a pretty big signal of weakness.
Are you scared? Are you scared? Now coming forward, are you scared?
I mean, It comes in waves.
Okay.
So yes, but I make a conscious effort every day to not let fear rule my life and my deeds. So yes, I'm scared, but this is the right thing. It's the necessary thing. And I was raised right. I think the fact that this doesn't ultimately reside in the government anymore. This is held in an illegal internationalist regime, some sort of international cabal of sorts, mix of corporate, military, political, intelligence, and criminal interests that have come together, and they have subverted us and have taken this and have made it the source of their wealth and power.
This is super disturbing. I mean, this is someone that had access to the most sensitive information at the Pentagon, confirming what has been called a conspiracy theory that's been out there for years, that there's this group out there operating with and without government cooperation, apparently more powerful than the government and other world governments, as some type of international group that's using this technology to their advantage. Of course, as we say, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Apparently, that's what's happening with this technology. And as we're going to get into a little bit later here, even the science, they have even hijacked the science.
Any regrets now?
I trusted too much, and I did not trust myself enough. Took some, I paid some prices, and I do not doubt that there are the seeds for future costs I'll have to pay in the future. Well, with the job with government, my career is dead. It has been dead for years now. I have a file on me. I will, even if I went back in, even if I chose to never do any of this and just keep working, I predict that I would have found my career stunted mysteriously as soon as it would have sought to advance into what I thought was a noble mission. That has changed. It's been a very painful, costly process to find allies, but I have them. There's more of us.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't stop.
You think anybody has been killed because they knew too much on this topic?
Yes, I believe, and I think, and I could probably help someone else prove it.
Mm-hmm.
But lethal action has been taken against people that tried to get the truth out, or maybe we're just considered wild cards, not able to be efficiently controlled, no longer useful. I think once you taste the darkness, you like using it. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than us. This is the fate of our people. And to me, I'm willing to pay that price.
Is it ironic you have to put your face out with us to protect yourself at this point? That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
This is absolutely what I did not want to do.
I know. I can attest to that. This is exactly what you did not want to do.
Correct.
You can go back to my previous episode where we talk about how Matthew Brown went through the entire process the way he thought he was supposed to. He reported this information to his direct superior. His direct superior was like, nah. Okay. He went to his superior's superior. That person told him, hey, this is some kind of joke. Don't worry about it. We got this. And then never heard anything back. He went the whistleblower route. He goes to Congress, and instead of being in a seat speaking with a congressperson, he's in a seat speaking with a professional staffer who kind of doesn't treat it very seriously. They get it on the record at the UAP hearings, but again, there's just nothing. There's no follow through. The whole thing is essentially just nothing to see here, folks. Let's move on. That's why he had to come out, because to him, that was not enough. People are not taking this seriously enough. People need to wake up and see what's happening and what's going on.
Gaming it out. There's more than me. More will come. I could say more if I wanted to. Hopefully this rises to a level of public attention that demands it be addressed in a serious way. I can't cause that alone. Other people will, but more need to come. And I think at this point, I like to say directly to the members of our military and our intelligence community, the time is now where you must choose whether you honor your oath or your orders. And if you have courage, you already know the answer. But for the rest of you, lead, follower, get out of the way. Get out of the way.
The oath that all service members take, the oath that I took when I went into the service, is to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When Matthew Brown says there's a difference between your oath and your orders, what he's referring to is that if you're given orders that are illegal, that are unconstitutional, that are immoral, that are unethical, you swore an oath to the Constitution, not to the general. And it's your duty to step forward and say, this is unconstitutional. So lead, follow, or get out of the way.
When I wrote this document, I've kind of given my state of mind and the measures I took to protect it. I'm also, familiar with ways that information can be extracted, that passwords and encryption don't matter. So I didn't write everything down.
So there are other bullets left to fire if you needed to.
Yeah. Talk about things getting lost in the shuffle. I highly doubt many members of the public read 11 pages, much less the first.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, there's an interesting area. People might notice that is out of order, too. Things are sequentially out of order. There's missing sections.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of that last sections says sensitive sources from mouth to ear.
Mm-hmm. We talked about keeping that in or what to, how far to go with.
What does that mean?
Well, exactly what it says. Those words were only spoken from my mouth to another's ear. It is true. And I can't think of anything more pressing for our nation to come to terms with than the fact that we have been deceived and our rights taken away to protect the privileges of an elite few. I am not going to live my life knowing that I could have helped prevent another generation of America and humanity from living in ignorance.
I rewound that very brief section and played it probably 10 times and listened to that tone in Matthew Brown's voice. Thank God for this man. He is not playing around. This is something that the American people deserve to know. We're all involved, whether we know it or not. And the truth needs to come out.
Do you think there's anybody in government who knows? And if they do know, is there any reason why this should stay secret? Or at least some of it should stay secret that the public cannot handle?
No. The only reason for secrecy is fear and greed. And that is the paradigm that we must confront and overcome. As for the public and what their reaction might be to this information, good, bad, indifference, I think we already have our answer. It's going to be indifference.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the stakes are made clear. This is not about protecting, healing. This is about power and control. This isn't about trying to save what's good. It's about getting rid of what's evil.
So we're already effed, basically. This isn't about, in Matthew Brown's opinion, light and happiness. This is about rooting out evil. And evil can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, which is why I decided in this episode to talk a little bit about this whole theory of aliens maybe being demons, or these interdimensional beings maybe being demonic in some sense. Because there is a faction of the Pentagon, a rather large faction that believes this. Is that what Matthew Brown's referring to here? I'm not sure. In my opinion, what he's referring to is the fact that there's this international group that answers to no one and caters to the ultimate rich and elite to continue whatever agenda they decide it is that they want to have. Unfortunately, because this is unchecked by Congress or any other government that we know of, we don't know what that agenda is. As far as recreating craft, what does he have to say about that? Because that's a big component of this. ARV or RV. Well, what are you recreating? What are those vehicles that you're recreating? Where do they come from? How are we doing this?
Yeah, I think we've absolutely replicated some of these capabilities in inferior forms, and oftentimes maybe disaggregated from what was at once a unitary system, but we're only able to do a small part what that system does. I think the U.S. military might be allowed to use some of this technology in the national defense, but I don't think they ultimately have control over it. Deterrence, strategic deterrence, has migrated out of, has evolved from being relying on nuclear weapons as the pinnacle.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we have, and others have developed the means to maybe utilize nuclear reactions to create some very dangerous effects through directed energy.
Your concern is directed energy weaponry.
Among many. But when it comes to WMDs and relations to this technology, I think we have been successful in both deriving new science that we have then suppressed to preserve a strategic advantage. And I think I probably don't want to talk too much more about deterrent.
Directed energy weapons. We've talked about this on previous episodes. If you noticed, that video with Amy Eskridge's hand was posted by her, and you can see that there are burn marks above her wrist. She was working on a classified project, and she noticed this was happening. She's working on a computer that's completely offline, no internet, no nothing, no connection, because it's a highly classified project that she's working on. And she believed that they were using microwave directed energy weapons to read what her hands were typing. It's really scary stuff. She also encountered other issues with directed energy weapon attacks, burns on her back. I can't really get anyone to talk to me about Amy Eskridge, and I think that's because folks are terrified about what happened to her. I'm still digging into that. We're still going to have an episode down the road where we do a deep dive. As for now, you can see even Matthew Brown has concerns about this, because these are the kinds of weapons that can be used against you, and they can basically make other people think you're going crazy, which is terrible in the worst kind of way. Matthew Brown is extremely worried about DEWs to the point where he doesn't really want to open that door.
Who are they? Why are they here? Why don't they show us what's going on?
I think I have a good degree of confidence that the reason they're here is us. I think life, especially sentient life, is a precious thing. And I think to some, it might be a resource. I think humanity to some level is a resource for them.
Like a commodity?
Possibly a commodity, possibly a form of entertainment, possibly medical related.
Insane. Possibly a commodity, possibly entertainment, possibly medical. That is pretty crazy to think about. And the fact that it's tied to evil, that's kind of scary too. I mean, you have these essentially very like powerful, elite, ultra wealthy, ultra rich folks that are communicating apparently with these things. I guess they would have to be to fulfill their own agenda of, I guess keeping things status quo or moving things in the direction that they want them moved in. It's no wonder this man is worried about his life coming forward. And I've said it a lot on my previous videos. We have got to make sure Matthew Brown stays safe, protected, and continues to tell these stories. And maybe one day we'll hear some of that mouth to ear information that he is holding back just in case.
Think they live here?
Yes.
For all intents and purposes?
Yes.
Always?
I don't know about always, but it certainly appears that they have been here for most of recorded history. At least some element of this has been here for most of human recorded history. I think they're both just as powerful as we think, but also less. And I think there is not a single they here. Certainly multiple factions of the same species, if not multiple species. And all the complexity that brings, which might be our best hope. What I have learned is that we live in a dream, a carefully constructed reality. We make use of a science that is tightly controlled and suppressed and distorted. I think we are left behind.
Humans.
I think normies, the normal humans, the people have been left behind. Us.
If we're being lied to about science and what's real and what isn't, that should really open your eyes, because that means reality as all of us know it is different than what we think, which is why Matthew Brown here is saying we're in a dream, a carefully constructed dream, because the truth is that's right in front of us is really not being conveyed to us. That is scary. And if the science is being manipulated or hidden, it's not really science then, is it? And that's why we're going to get into some stuff with Eric Weinstein in just a moment about him calling out some of these so-called geniuses and leaders in the field about theories that after 50, 60 years, there's literally been no progress. That's not science. That's a theory, isn't it? Let's let Matthew Brown finish, and then we're going to get into that.
People need to understand that we might have freedom of speech but that has been subverted. We do not have freedom of inquiry. We are blocked from learning what we need to know. Just in the public world, we are blocked from advancing in science. We are taught false science intentionally to prevent us from learning more. We live in the Matrix. It's just much more boring than the movie.
There you have it again. This reference to living in the Matrix, living in an alternate reality, living in a hologram. I think in this case, what he's saying is not knowing the truth, right? Living our day-to-day life, but not really understanding what's going on and what the powers that be are doing behind the scenes. I think that's an important takeaway from this interview.
No, I've reached out directly to institutions that claim that they are here to help UAP whistleblowers specifically, both in the process of coming forward and any sort of stability afterwards. It's been radio silence. At best, at worst, one of those institutions has stolen my information. There is no organized help for whistleblowers. It is all controlled. It is all at either the special interest of industry that wants to get in on this, or by the existing powers that be.
Intelligence agencies who have infiltrated or created these things.
Correct.
Look, man, if you were to die tomorrow because of whatever reason, what do you want people to know right now? Like, what do you want people to know if you're just like fucking on?
You are not free. And this reality has far more to it than you have been allowed to believe. And God is real.
That is some powerful, powerful testimonies, some powerful words from Matthew Brown. If that didn't touch you, I don't know. The message to me, this is scary. Some of this is dark. But God is real. And whatever that God may be to you, rely on God. Trust in God. And He'll carry us through this. On to the hidden science stuff. Eric Weinstein, pretty controversial figure. I think because he's going out and calling these scientists on their bullshit. He's saying, listen, string theory is it, prove it. And so far, there's been a lot of noise, but as far as factual proven models, kind of a lot of crickets. This I thought was very interesting because Matthew Brown talks a lot about this. And I feel like there is kind of a pivot going on in the science community right now, in particular physics, that has also maybe been misled by government entities, possibly CIA, due to the fact that they're concerned about our national security. Essentially, like Matthew Brown says, the normies don't need to know that stuff. That should piss you off. I know it pisses me off. So let's get into it here. Eric Weinstein going off.
We want to be honest about it, and we don't want to pay for our honesty with our lives, our support, and our careers. So right now, we have this really important thing that happened that we haven't discussed on this call anyway, which is Mark Andreessen's conversation at the White House that has been replayed numerous times.
We had meetings in D.C. in May where we talked to them about this, and the meetings were absolutely horrifying, and we came out basically deciding we had to endorse.
Mark, add a little color to absolutely horrifying. What did you hear in those meetings?
They said, look, AI is one of these technology. AI is a technology basically that the government is going to completely control. This is not going to be a startup thing. They actually said flat out to us, don't do AI startups. Like don't fund AI startups. That's not something that we're going to allow to happen. They're not going to be allowed to exist. There's no point. They basically said AI is going to be a game of 2 or 3 big companies working closely with the government and we're going to basically wrap them in a, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to basically wrap them in a government cocoon. We're going to protect them from competition. We're going to control them, and we're going to dictate what they do. And then I said, I don't understand how you're going to lock this down so much, because like the math for, AI is like out there and it's being taught everywhere. And, they literally said, during the Cold War, we classified entire areas of physics, and took them out of, they literally said, during the Cold War, we classified entire areas of physics out of the research community, and like entire branches of physics basically went dark and didn't proceed. And that if we decide we need to, we're going to do the same thing to the math underneath AI.
And wouldn't it be delicious and fun to see Michio Kaku, Ed Witten, Lenny Susskind, Michael Duff, Jeff Harvey actually have to face people who know what they're talking about and have a discussion of what did we just do for 40 years? Are we protecting the American public from restricted data? I have no idea. The equations are not without interest or merit. It's the sociology should be hunted and removed with extreme prejudice. It's anti-science.
I saw a tweet saying that somebody had been to a string theory convention and had asked the question, what is string theory? And the best string theorists on the planet came up with the answer, we kind of don't know what string theory is.
And the other answer is whatever it is that we're doing. Whatever it is that the string theory community is doing. Even if they did something that had nothing to do with string theory, they've now tried to say, how about this? They'll just keep lying. Lying as a way of life. Lying to the public as... I think Susskind somewhere else in this interview says something like we have to keep interest in physics high. Science is fine. What we have now learned to call the science TM is an abomination. And I think we could make fantastic progress within theoretical physics within 5 years. And I can promise you nobody's interested in funding it.
There you have it. Some pretty big names in science called out by Weinstein saying, hey, throw down. Let's sit down. Let's have a debate. Let's talk about this so-called string theory and multiverse theory and everything else that might have just been made up to kind of derail the science to begin with. He mentions Leonard Susskind as well, and we're going to show a brief clip here of Susskind kind of being challenged on string theory. And one problem that Susskind had is that he was a huge proponent of string theory, but lately it seems like he's kind of been backing off of that, saying, look, there's just a little too much to that, a little too much. The landscape is too large, essentially. And so he's really just now wanting to focus on quantum mechanics. It's not a knock on Susskind, but you go around for 20, 40 years and you're saying this is the way. And then all of a sudden, well, I'm going to focus on something else because that's kind of too confusing. That's a red flag, folks. That's a red flag in the scientific community. And now you have these geniuses, instead of working together on solving some of the biggest problems of our time, they're clashing over what's real and what's not. Let's take a listen to Susskind here, and then we're going to get to Weinstein on this really cool appearance he had on the Rogan show.
We've really reached some very, very difficult things in the physics of fundamental interactions and so forth. Experiments have gotten progressively harder. Now, an experiment can easily take a whole scientific lifetime. So experiments from the beginning to the end can be 40 years or more. Entire scientific lifetimes. And so we've run into the problem of the difficulty of experiment. We've also come, if this picture of string theory that has this wildly proliferating landscape of possibilities, if that's correct, then we've run into the obstacle of just too many things to sort. So things are hard. For that reason, many of my colleagues, myself included, said, let's put that on the back burner. let's simply focus on the consistency of quantum mechanics and gravity. We know gravity exists. There's no question about that. And we have to be able to put it into our quantum theories. We have to be able to make it mesh with our quantum theories. And so most of the work that people like myself, people that I interact with on a daily basis, is about the connection between quantum mechanics and gravity. Obviously, that's not completely satisfactory. We do want to have a theory which describes the real world of electrons, photons, protons, neutrons, and we're far from it. I think we're very far from it. If the universe is really big enough, then no matter how unlikely something is, it will occur somewhere.
There he is, the man, the legend, after a prolific career of promoting string theory, saying, yeah, maybe not. And that's, it's a shame, because what Weinstein is saying here is that these folks really delayed progress by ushering out, shaming, and snubbing from the scientific community anybody that had any other theories to present, because this is the way. This explains everything, except it doesn't. Let's listen to Weinstein kind of get a little bit deeper on this here and why it was so damaging, not only our country, but humans as a species.
What I wanted to know was why during the 1950s did something happen that resulted in a 70-year stagnation in a field called quantum gravity. Quantum gravity is like a startup that cannot ship a product after 70 years. And it's still taken over in theoretical physics as sort of the prestige theory field. Quantum gravity is the replacement of something is a replacement for something that used to be known as the unified field. So Einstein wasn't chasing quantum gravity. He was chasing unified field theory. And unified field theory was much closer to what we would call classical physics, where you get quantum field theory by quantizing a classical theory. That fell out of favor. And around 1984, we gradually had unified field theory become sort of like a joke, old-timey expression for the future of physics. And we substituted quantum gravity for the merger of quantum theory, quantum field theory, quantum mechanics, and gravitational physics under general relativity. That program, that dog doesn't hunt. And it hasn't hunted for 70 years. So I wanted to trace this back. How is it that the field became convinced that something which clearly doesn't seem to work and has had all of the resources, all of the best minds at its disposal, it sucks up everything, and it just doesn't work? Why can't I question this? Where did this come from?
Why can't I question this? Where did that come from? I think that's kind of a rhetorical question. You have this educational system in place where if you go against the grain, you're a kook, you're a loony. And so you can do it, but then you might get kind of blacklisted and sort of pushed out of the community and not included in things, which is garbage. I mean, science is supposed to be exploring everything, every theory that could possibly be imagined. We should be exploring. I digress. Let's let Weinstein continue here.
In 1984, there's an earthquake called the anomaly cancellation. And a failed theory of strong physics, the physics needed to glue two protons together in a helium nucleus because they both hate each other because of electromagnetism and want to separate, but something is binding them together like a family structure, right? Mm. That force we initially tried to fix by thinking of it as strings. We'll put like elastic bands between things and it'll pull things back together. That didn't work. But then we repurposed it and said, no, it's quantum gravity. And one single individual who is the most dominant mind on planet Earth at the moment, said in 1984, no, string theory is the way. This anomaly cancellation was unexpected, and it clearly points to the fact that we are, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to quantize.
Who's that person?
Edward Witten.
And in physics circles, you're not allowed to bring this guy up?
No, we talk about him. Everybody talks about him. But to challenge him? Think about Agent Smith. Think about playing one-on-one with Michael Jordan in his prime.
He's that good.
Joe, I don't think I'm dumb enough not to be intellectually afraid of anyone else on planet Earth at this point. I am terrified of this person.
Really?
So 100% of his efforts have been not making contact with physical reality.
Okay, let me hear.
Pretty weird way for a theory to start. The string theory started with a clever formula written down by Veneziano in an effort to satisfy not so well motivated phenomenological ideas about strong interaction scattering.
He came onto the scene and started telling us how everything was going to fit together. And nobody had ever heard a story like this. He said this was the way. You know, there are 5 string theories or whatever there are, 6, 4, I can't remember. And it's going to be one of them, and in 10 years we'll have the whole thing wrapped up. And everybody wanted to be on the winning team, knew that they weren't going to go up against this because they couldn't even figure out how he was doing what he was doing. And what was really going on was very different than people understood. He saw that this was effectively a coherent whole, and with help from a couple of other people who are often not as well acknowledged, one of which would be Michael Atiyah, another which would be Graham Siegel, another which would be Dan Quillen, and my good friend and postdoctoral advisor Isidore Singer. So there was sort of a small cabal of people who figured out that quantum field theory was not only a coherent story, it didn't really have to do with physics at all. It was like calculus. You can use calculus to do physics. In fact, you can't do physics without it. But you can also use calculus to optimize inventory and make your profits go up. But the machine itself isn't about physics. So this was the most romantic backfiring in the history of physics in a certain sense. These guys set out to say, we are going to quantize gravity. In other words, quantize geometry, the geometry of Einstein and Riemann. And what happened was exactly the reverse. They gravitized the quantum. They geometrized the quantum. So it's been a remarkably productive. The reason we can say how brilliant this person is because he geometrized the quantum at a level that we didn't know was possible. On the other hand, he never made contact with physical reality the way he was expecting and promising to do. So he's both the most accomplished of us and the person who drove physics the most off of the road.
So the dude's a genius, essentially trying to put together a new theory of everything using string theory, but it didn't work out. It actually had the reverse effect, but they continued to pursue it and push this narrative on people, even though it was all theory. Nothing proven, no real mechanism for showing that this is a true thing and it exists. It's all just theory and numbers on paper. There's no real mechanism. And it's been given that much time to research and develop and try time and time again to prove. I think that means it doesn't work. Or is it just beyond our comprehension? I don't know. But even the folks that were strong proponents of it, like we just heard, that were pushing this thing, are now backing away from it, saying, let's go into quantum physics, quantum gravity, or something we know is real. I think he was even quoted as saying, because we know gravity is real, we don't know string theory is real. That's why it's called theory.
Quantum gravity is really due to 2 families. One is a husband and wife team, and the other is father-son. The husband and wife team were named Bryce DeWitt, formerly, I think, Bryce Seligman, don't know why he changed his name, and his wife Cecile DeWitt, or Cecile DeWitt Moret. And the father-son team was Lewis Witten, who is still alive, now 101 years old, and Edward Witten. And then the really weird stuff happens. And this is why I was like curious about UFOs and gravity and all this stuff. The actual genesis of these two families having this outsized impact on the future of theoretical physics comes from two different people who are almost never talked about. Matter of fact, most physicists have no idea their names. One is named Agnew Bainson, and the other is named Roger Babson. And these two guys were deep into anti-gravity. So the world's greatest mind and greatest living theoretical physics mind is the son of the most prominent anti-gravity researcher, I swear, I kid you not, from the 1950s. Now, there's an official story about this. And the official story that both the DeWitts tell and the Whittons tell is, oh yeah, there were these crazy people, they were very embarrassing, they were always focused on anti-gravity. But we were clever enough to defraud them of their money to do real gravitational research. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, super funny. I mean, rich people that get to take advantage of intelligent people that maybe aren't as rich or powerful. I'm sure there's a big group of them that get off on that think it's super funny. It's super unfortunate because it sounds like some folks were onto something, and once again we have involvement from some shady characters, more than likely CIA, either derailing or monopolizing this technology, gathering it under some type of umbrella that they can, control. What they probably didn't plan on is the information age with the internet and folks getting tired of the manipulation and understanding that we've really had no big breakthroughs in physics since the atom bomb. Pretty interesting.
Because it's an embarrassment. And in order to understand this hugely productive period relative to the stagnation is incredibly high prestige. Like most of the positions at the Institute for Advanced Study, the top physics department ostensibly in the world, right? You had a director named Robert Dijkgraaf, string theorist. You had Edward Witten, string theorist. Natty Seiberg, string theorist. Juan Maldacena, string theorist. And you had this guy, Nima Arkani Hamed, who I hope you will have on this program, who is amazing, who is not a string theorist, but very string sympathetic. This thing dominated. It just took over. And this weird genesis of a high prestige field that can't accomplish what it's setting out to accomplish is in contrast to this mixed period between 1953 and 1973, where you have the world's most prestigious physicists palling around with pseudoscience. UFO type stuff, gravity shielding, all this stuff. So Babson is so crazy. You can't even believe the story is true. But he claims that his sister drowned in a pond because even though she was a good swimmer, she couldn't overcome gravity. So gravity becomes his sworn enemy. And he's going to use his fortune that he's predicted from that he's gotten from predicting the crash of 1929 because of Newton's laws. What goes up must come down, so it gets out of the stock market 6 months early. Babson makes a fortune. He, Edison, and Clarence Birdeye of frozen food, fame, form this sort of little intellectual collective where they're going to defeat gravity. So, for example, because people are going to say, Eric, this is all nonsense, and it isn't. This guy littered universities all across the country with these monuments to prove that this anti-gravity stuff was actually taking place at American universities. And he established an essay contest. All right, so check this out. This monument has been erected by the Gravity Research Foundation, Roger Babson, founder, to remind students of the blessings forthcoming when science determines what gravity is and how it works and how it may be controlled. This is about UFOs and the idea that we are going to harness the power of gravity and we are going to get a supreme advantage. And these stones are littered around the country. Here's another one.
So this is not widely known that this research is being done.
This is hugely embarrassing to us.
Why hugely embarrassing? Because our government, Air Force, CIA, whatever other force was behind this, spent a long time making anyone that talked about UFOs, UAPs, or anti-gravity look like a kook. And so it became embarrassing in the scientific community to talk about this stuff. But we see that there was a time when it was believed that we were going to reach this pinnacle where we could manipulate gravity. So much so, this gentleman posted pillars all across the United States at universities trying to get the best and brightest motivated and thinking about this kind of stuff. So why did that stop? Why did that become so embarrassing? Our own government or forces behind it were trying to make people feel like kooks. So it's almost like now you have two factions. One wants the truth out there and one wants to control the messaging.
Bryce DeWitt. So here's how the two stories cross. Okay. You start off with Babson and Bainson.
Okay.
They're the money. Babson found something called the Gravity Research Foundation in New Boston, New Hampshire. And he gets the Glenn L. Martin Company, which is the precursor of Martin Marietta, precursor of Lockheed Martin. Do you know this stuff?
No.
Okay. And he gets them to hire Lewis Witten out of Johns Hopkins. Lewis Witten is a respectable physicist who takes the position and forms something called the Research Institute for Advanced Study. Now, you've probably heard of Bell Labs or Xerox PARC, and you probably haven't heard of the Research Institute for Advanced Study.
No.
Yet, this has illustrious names associated with it. Solomon Lefschetz, the great topologist, comes out of retirement to work on this anti-gravity inspired project. Rudolf Kallman of Kallman Filtering. There's no shortage. Sheldon Glashow, who discovers spontaneous symmetry breaking under Julian Schwinger at Harvard. So it's this marriage of utter madness and kookiness with top drawer white shoe respectability. So this was my puzzle about UFOs. What was this anti-gravity thing between 53 and 73? And the reason it ends in 1973 is a guy named Mike Mansfield, I think of Montana as a senator, passes something called the Mansfield Amendment, which discontinues Army or Department of Defense military funding for blue sky research inside of our universities. And
what is blue sky research?
Hey, you're a young person, you're super smart, here's a pile of money, don't even tell us what you're working on, we just believe in you, go to it. This is what caused us to be the envy of the effing world, cowboy science. Because around Sputnik, we wanted the best of the best to go into science. Around 1973, we discontinue this. We start talking about Golden Fleece Awards. How did you waste the taxpayers' money, you know? And we become incapable.
That's a real shame. I didn't know that. But to give innovators and brilliant minds resources they need to just go be brilliant and innovate, to take that away based on some silly budgeting thing. Like, you look at all the waste of money that's going on right now. Look at all that waste. And you think we needed to stop funding geniuses being geniuses and letting them go and innovate. What a disappointment. What a disappointment. I hope that changes. Y'all get out there and vote because this stuff matters. We've heard Eric mention the UFO thing a couple times. Being a physicist, of course, that's going to be of natural interest. The conversation he has with Joe takes him into misdirection. They start talking about, during World War II, the operation we had that we used inflatable tanks, we used inflatable trucks. I think it was called Operation Frontier or something like that. Y'all can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But essentially what we did is we misdirected. We showed these huge troop buildups and equipment buildups in areas We wanted the to think we were going to invade, and then it turned out they were all just inflatable tanks and inflatable trucks and not real troops out there, which got Eric to thinking about physics, anti-gravity, electrogravitic propulsion, whatever you want to call it, and misdirection. And this is some fascinating insight. Take a listen here to a brilliant mind talk about what could be happening with UFOs.
Now, if you assume that that's the basic paradigm, which is whenever we're going to do something badass, we're also going to do something fake. I thought the UFOs was the Operation Fortitude part of something real, and I goofed.
So what do you think it is now?
Well, that's the new question.
And what made you shift this perspective?
So there was this weird thing that happened where we announced through the New York Times that this stuff may be more real than anyone cared to imagine. You know, and Jeremy Corbell was releasing these videos, and who was leaking them, I don't know. And the New York Times was authenticating, and, you know, you get all of this, again, tons of ambiguity, so everybody's decision tree blows out. Nobody can think straight. But I thought, oh no, what if the old Feynman stories that I've been following are actually about something rather than about a deception? So, for example, Feynman has a story where he says, hey, there was this guy who was giving physics lectures to aerospace engineers, and they didn't like him, so I had to go out to Buffalo. I thought, Buffalo? That's Curtis Wright. You're going to Curtis Wright Aerospace. And he's got another one about, give me $1 because somebody calls him up and says, give us the nuclear patents to, fission-driven planes and crazy stuff. Feynman is constantly telling us, he's got a story called It's Greek to Me, where he shows up in North Carolina. Can't remember whether he's supposed to go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, or Greenville. And he has to figure it out, and he says, I'm late to the conference. There would be a bunch of people mumbling the words G mu nu. And the guy says, it's Chapel Hill. So he goes there. So it's a cute story about how clever Feynman is, which they all are. But that was a conference sponsored by the Institute for Field Physics at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, sponsored by Agnew Bainson through Bryce DeWitt, who is the person who repurposed the Gravity Research Foundation essay, which is only supposed to be about harnessing gravity, anti-gravity devices like UFOs. And he said, well, if you really want to get to anti-gravity, you have to do it through quantum gravity. Right? Now, he did that, and then a couple of people from the Institute, it was Arnowit and Desser, entered and won this competition that had the stench about it, because it was like stigmatized. You're going to enter a competition for anti-gravity devices? Ha, ha, ha. Oppenheimer says, wow, you guys won this by using the name of the Institute for Advanced Study. You give the money back right now. We're not going to touch pseudoscience.
So these cats were definitely taking this anti-gravitational stuff seriously. And these were not dumb people. These were super intelligent people. So they're all talking about this project, this subject, but we don't ever really see anything come out of it. Is Eric telling us that this went black under the government auspices of protection, defense, and had all of these folks that were in the field develop this stuff right under our noses without us knowing it, and now it's out there to the point to where we're seeing it, and so folks are wanting answers? I don't know. It's really interesting trying to read between the lines there. What's great here is that I think due to frustration levels, Eric decides to call out what he thinks may be kind of the modern Manhattan Project around UFO, UAP, and anti-gravitation. Listen to him mention some interesting schools and parties that are in this field kind of flying under the radar that might be working on things we can't even get our heads around?
The State University of New York at Stony Brook has an astounding collection of monster minds. And it's not highly regarded as a university. I mean, it's strong, but you would have no idea how strong this place is. It's got multiple Fields medalists. It's got an institute called the Center for Geometry, Simon Center for Geometry and Physics. C.N. Yang, who's arguably the greatest living theoretical physicist, is at this university. He's 101 years old, so he's pretty much on his way out, but this is where he's called home. And it's not advertised as the powerhouse that it is. So shout out to the State University of New York at Stony Brook. If I was going to locate a Manhattan Project in plain sight and get U.S. News and World to report this as a minor player in research, that's where I'd go. The world's greatest mathematics and physics department is Renaissance Technologies. And I said, what? Didn't make any sense to me. It's great people, but it's a hedge fund. Okay, so you've got this weird thing where you've got three basic institutions that are very closely intertwined. You've got Brookhaven National Laboratory. You've got State University of New York at Stony Brook, a mid-level university with an out-of-this-world math and physics program. And you've got a hedge fund that makes more money than anybody can possibly imagine. Like, there used to be 4 fortunes in hedge funds that didn't make any sense. One was D.E. Shaw, one was Bernie Madoff, one was Jeff Epstein, and one was Renaissance Technologies. Renaissance has existed in its medallion fund for decades, has turned in a performance never seen by anything else remotely, effectively just a money printing machine. No one knows how it works. I've met with Jim Simons one-on-one for 3 hours, and because his wife is an economist, my wife is an economist, I'm a differential geometer, he's a differential geometer, I gave him this entire theory that all of modern neoclassical economics is actually differential geometric. The highbrow version of this doesn't work, and the lowbrow version of this doesn't work so far as we know. The lowbrow version is called pseudoscientific anti-gravity, gravity shielding, electrogravitics, gravidodynamics. The highbrow version of this is called quantum gravity, and all the most respectable people are in it, and it doesn't work. And you can't say, why are we doing this if it doesn't work? David Gross and Ed Witten should be in front of the community explaining, why did you take all the smartest people, all the resources, all the attention? Michio Kaku, get Michio Kaku in here with me. Michio Kaku is out of control. Sean Carroll is covering up for this as well.
In what way?
They are too kind. Brian Greene. Like, I had this interchange with Brian Greene where I said, you know, we're not being honest about the failure of string theory. And Brian's like, oh, well, maybe we were a little bit exuberant. And I blurt out, Institute for Arts and Ideas, I blurt out, no, you put a lot of people's careers in the shredder in order to have this quantum gravity experiment, which is like, you know, the people bowing and praying to this thing that doesn't work. In an open forum, we have got to purge the physics community of its quackery, and the quackery is coming from the high prestige version of this. The high prestige version of anti-gravity is called quantum gravity, and it just doesn't work.
Well, there you have it. You've got the financial, you've got the lab, you've got the university with the brilliant minds. So I think, again, out of frustration, Weinstein, because he's running into all this nonsense in every direction with folks spending entire careers and their brain power on stuff that just flat out doesn't work, and leading other folks to study and theorize and waste brain power on things that just flat out don't work, while the stuff that does work is really being kept under wraps. I don't know. I can say that Eric Weinstein is a brilliant mind. If you want to say he's wrong about all that, you better get your research in order, because he certainly has his in order. Moving on, I covered To the Stars Academy a few episodes back. We talked about what the hell was that, right? Like, it came and went in a flash. It's still here, but essentially they facilitated the release of some information, and then poof, the folks that were kind of behind the scenes running it, most of them moved on to other things once they, I guess, couldn't really raise the money. Well, Julian Dory had on a fantastic guest here that is a producer. He's runs in these circles with folks, these same folks in this UFO community, and kind of gives us a behind the scenes look at what happened, because we did spend an episode looking into this, like what the hell happened there. So I found this super fascinating. Take a look and tell me what you think down in the comments section.
Like, who the fuck is Tom DeLonge? Like, obviously, like, he's Blink 182 guy, but like that was one of the most unintentionally funny parts in your movie when you were talking about To the Stars, and you have Tom DeLonge coming out on the stage talking about it, and then like, and here's his 5 board members. Fed, and I'm just like, and you even said like something sly, like, obviously all CIA, NSA, so whatever.
Yeah.
But like, how does Tom DeLonge, like, no disrespect, he doesn't seem like the second coming of fucking Albert Einstein. How does he end up in this situation where he's like telling Lou Elizondo, like, you're going to do what I tell you to do?
Well, here's what happened. Tom DeLonge was poking around government, trying to get to people that could tell him about UFOs. And he was doing that because he was just a regular guy. Yeah, he happens to be a rock star, but he was interested in the topic. And he opened a lot of doors because he was a rock star. And before TTSA, years before that, he did a couple of UFO conferences where he talked about that. He did the International UFO Conference he videotaped in, and he's like, look, I'm just like you guys. I just want to know what's going on. And that's all legit. In fact, there's really nothing illegit about what Tom's tried to do. So he was getting to some people, and he was getting some answers, and he was getting told some things. And when the powers that be behind the Lou Elizondo and the whole rollout, which I believe was a very organized thing, that the TTSA was waiting in the wings. Lou and Chris came forward with this information. They didn't do that in a vacuum. They were cleared to do it. But Ralph Blumenthal, who wrote the article in my movie, says, oh, no, that's not true. But if you put the pieces together, it has to be true. And maybe Ralph doesn't understand it. But when Lou wrote his resignation letter to the Department of Defense, then he went and met with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, and he showed them, and he told them about the program. TTSA was already formed, organized, and ready to go. It didn't just form in 2 weeks. So what it looks like to me is that all of these guys had this plan to roll out TTSA, and as a way of opening up information to the public that was going to be very organized and very well done. Tom DeLonge made himself very useful to the powers that be, because they're like, wait a minute, let's put this whole thing under this guy.
Blink 182 for aliens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Leslie Kean in that that series that J.J. Abrams produced was talking about Tom DeLonge's role in it, and she actually said that he was a useful idiot to these people. But
oh, it stings. Tom DeLonge, a useful idiot. Okay, but a hell of a musician, right? We can at least give him that.
Anyway, so the TTSA was waiting in the wings with this fundraising thing. They came out, Tom DeLonge on stage, he had all these guys. Now, all these guys had been brought into this organization. It didn't happen by accident. This was how they decided they were going to begin this rollout. When Lou submitted his resignation letter and went to the New York Times,
he submitted that resignation letter. He lost a certain amount of retirement income from resigning early from one of the organizations that he worked with. But he did that, in my opinion, because he knew that he was going to jump onto the TTSA and they were going to go out and raise millions and millions of dollars. Unfortunately, they only raised like 2.7 million. It wasn't enough. And for a variety of reasons, that organization kind of imploded. It's still out there. It's still doing things. It still has some of its original members, but they never raised the millions and millions and millions of dollars they thought they were going to raise. So what happened then is that, Lou and everybody kind of branched out. The whole plan fell apart. And the TTSA taking the lead and leading everybody toward disclosure, that was plan A for getting this technology to the mainstream, is TTSA is going to bring it and bubble it up. Well, that didn't work. And then all these unexpected FOIA releases came out. And then the Defense Intelligence Agency releases these DIRDs that supposedly came out of Bigelow Aerospace, investigating dozens of different technologies that we don't have. The whole thing is the result of an organized plan going sideways. And it's because what we're witnessing in the mainstream is an internal battle between the people that manage this information and want it out and the people that manage this information and don't want it out.
Man, so once again, Greer, if you go back to that Vlad interview, was right. Stephen Greer was right. It seems that Tom DeLonge was kind of used, and then when these guys couldn't get the big payday they thought they would get, just kind of abandoned. And now you've got Tom DeLonge responsible, definitely financially responsible for what's become essentially a media company. And that's unfortunate because he really was excited to be a part of this new movement. And it looks like he just got railroaded. And that takes us to kind of the dark side of this, right? Like the folks trying to either prevent us from knowing more or out there spreading disinformation so we don't know what it is we're dealing with when it comes to strange phenomena, UFOs, UAPs, and all the other craziness that's going on in the world. Ron James is going to get a little into this here about who these folks are that are into these programs and what are some of the things that they're actually doing. I think in one podcast, I said I had a great deal of respect for Colonel John Alexander. But after hearing this and doing a little bit more studying, now I'm not so sure. You take a listen. Let me know what you think down in the comments section as we get into this kind of darker side of this phenomena.
Well, John Alexander, one of the things that's well known about him is that he headed up a program for the Army looking into non-lethal weapons technology. Okay. And on the surface, you think, well, what does that mean? Oh, rubber bullets, right? Or electricity, whatever. But during one of our interviews, he said something about how he was down in Brazil working with shamans while he was involved in the non-lethal weapons technology research. He's with shamans in South America studying non-lethal weapons technologies. Alexander's background, there's pictures, a lot of stuff with like black magic and all kinds of esoteric stuff. This guy's in non-lethal weapons research looking at literally casting spells and etheric stuff. I wasn't looking at rubber bullets, dude. I mean, these guys are looking at ways to control energy that we don't see and affect people's souls and all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
That's what he said. Souls, right? Black magic coming after your souls. How can we mess with someone's soul? Matthew Brown, maybe people are a commodity. Colonel John Alexander looking into black magic that can manipulate people's souls. Holy shit. So now we're getting into some really weird stuff. Let's continue to listen because this is a rabbit hole I usually try to stay out of. But if I'm going to be open to everything, open to hearing all the opinions and discussing everything that's out there in the ether, this is one of those things. And like I said, there's folks at the Pentagon that do take this seriously. Let's let Ron James continue here.
A significant number of people who interact with this content, and then even looking at other content on the internet to look through comment sections and see if the patterns exist there, which they did. A significant number of people who are highly, highly interested in this content are extremely religious. And to be even more frank about it, extremely, seemingly Christian religious.
Well, there's multifacets to this. The fundamental religious belief systems versus the non-human intelligence question. So one thing that Lou Elizondo told me, and that he's told this to other people, and he said it in the show Unidentified, one of the biggest things, surprisingly, that he ran into with opposition within the Pentagon and within the Defense Department to the work that he was doing is that there was a very large contingent of people that believed that this was a demonic force, as in demons, and that we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be investigating it. We shouldn't be poking the tiger in the eye. And that was not just a little voice in the Pentagon. This was a huge group of people.
Wait, they thought the phenomenon that was being witnessed was demons?
Yes, within the military establishment, within the Pentagon, within DOD, there was a large number of people that opposed his work because they thought from a very, very fundamentalist viewpoint that we're dealing with demonic activity, and that it actually affected his ability to move forward and get funding. It was one of the biggest oppositions that he said he ran into. And he said that to me. I have it. He said it on TV shows. You can find him saying it on the show Unidentified. So this is not something that I'm just making up. Yeah. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where you have like Tim Burchett, who is Tim is a Christian man. He's a Republican. He's a representative for the state of Tennessee. Very, very salt of the earth, very, conservative views. But when I sat down and interviewed him, his feeling was, if you look in the Bible and you look at Ezekiel building the wheel, there's a lot of people that think that was a spaceship, and that's okay. And so, there's another wing of Christianity that is okay with the idea. The Pope, the Catholic Church came out a few years ago and said, there's probably life on other planets. It's okay. It doesn't.
Wait, I didn't even know that. I should know that.
No, they made an official proclamation.
Really?
Yeah.
The man couldn't get funding to research this stuff and get on top of it more inside of the government because there's a huge group inside that states, let's not poke the bear, essentially. We think this is demonic, and we think that investigating it further is only, I guess, going to make it larger, make it more of a problem. There's a lot of stuff out there when you start researching this, actually. One of the more polarizing figures with some very strong views on this issue is Beck Lover. Danny Jones, thank the Lord for him, had Beck Lover on a show recently, and here's some really just a completely different view of things I have not really considered or bothered to look into much, but I think it's my responsibility in trying to grow this channel to expose anyone that's tuned in and watching these videos to all the different viewpoints and all the different stances out there, because until we really factually know what's going on, if we ever do, anything is possible. So take a listen to Beck Lover on the Danny Jones podcast.
You want to see an alien, folks? Look in the mirror if you believe in God. You're the alien. We know the species of the devil, Satan is his other name, lived on this earth before us. There's an obsession, and really, I'm gonna let people study this on their own. If you've never heard of a man named Aleister Crowley, have you? This man is the father, in my opinion, of what's known as the space age. His best friends were Ron L. Hubbard, creator of Scientology, L. Ron, sorry, Walt Disney, and the man that literally supposedly got us to space, Jack Parsons, okay? This guy, Crowley, goes to the Pyramid of Giza, meditates, and anyone can do this on Google. Type in Aleister Crowley drawing, and you will see an image of what looks like how we see them in the movies, an alien or what they call a gray. He didn't really call it an alien. He called it a god, okay? He was practicing black magic. This is mentioned in all the scriptures from the Abrahamic faiths. This guy's in California. He's out there. They're doing all types of rituals and crazy shit, okay? One guy found Scientology, which believes we aliens create. There's been an agenda to convince humanity they were created by aliens and not God. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled wasn't to convince the world he doesn't exist. It was to convince the world he's an alien. All I'm saying is this. My theory is this is why the occult was obsessed with the prophet Solomon. When you study scripture, Bible, Torah, Quran, why were they obsessed with Solomon? Most of the rituals were done with his two pillars, checkered boards, because it represents the dimension of darkness and the dimension of light. The dimension of the demonic force and our dimension, and the crossing of those two dimensions. What was Solomon's power? He was given the dominion, the authority over every living creature on earth and every living creature in a parallel dimension. I know this shit sounds crazy to you, but here's the correlation. We know that the devil, when he tried to lead the children of Adam astray, it's mentioned that he shapeshifted into a man and went amongst the children of Adam to teach the children of Cain, Adam's son, to teach them how to make music. There's your shapeshifter that they say with alien terminology. This is the time of mass deception. I believe the reason they've been preconditioning us for over 50, 60, 70 years, they're getting close to the point where they're going to unleash this on the earth, and you're going to see things you never thought in your wildest dreams. And you're looking at me as someone you know for 2 years, you're thinking, you're out of your fucking mind. They were on this earth before us. They travel at the speed of light. They can shapeshift. We know this. The question is they can't do it, and they're not in our dimension, so we can't see them the way they see us.
Are we in their dimension?
They can see us, but I believe they found a way to bring them into this dimension.
Who's
that's
they?
worshiping the elite of this world, the people that call the shots. That guy, Jack Parsons, used the word that Muslims use for Antichrist. He says he has a dream where this Antichrist figure comes to him, named D.E.W, and inspired him to make the fucking rocket fuel that got us through the atmosphere. I don't think any of this technology came originally from the human mind. 18-something, he was born, okay? And then he made his way to the U.S. But first he studied in, like, the Middle East. He learned, like, Cabal and all this crazy other stuff, like, ancient magic and all. And like I said, he was meditating in that pyramid.
Are there photos of him near the pyramids? Or around the pyramids?
I believe so. I hope you'll pop everything in. There's tons of pictures of him, bro. Yeah, he had government officials following him. He had artists following him, actors following him. Walt Disney was his boy, bro. Walt Disney was his boy, bro.
Wow.
Okay, so I don't find it a coincidence that this guy who's doing all this black magic and worshiping the devil and doing all this crazy shit, being contacted by beings, is by accident, bro. Jack Parsons is the reason we go to space, bro. He has a dream, Jack Parsons, in his own autobiography. You can read all this. You should know who Jack Parsons is. He discovers rocket fuel. Okay, this guy is chilling with Crowley, one of his, like, disciples. He sees a dream where a being named D.E.W. Dajjal is the Arabic word that Muslims use for Antichrist. Same concept. Muslims and Christians believe towards the end of time, someone will come claiming to be Christ when the world is in chaos. Everyone's starving, civilization collapses, like all hell breaks loose. And then this human being appears that says, I am God. This guy, who's not even Arab, says he sees a dream that the Antichrist came to him in the dream and said, you are very important for my work. I'm going to help you get to rockets up. And he taught him how to make what he created for rocketry.
Why do you
He's considered the father of rocketry.
Right, right.
He says he was contacted by a being named D.E.W, which is the same word Muslims use for Antichrist.
Pretty freaky stuff. I have gone down that rabbit hole years ago, and it is really, I mean, just weird that all these cats that were involved in getting us into space, developing the rocketry and the technology, were either Nazis, occultists, Satan worshippers, or all of the above. It's crazy to think about. So Beck Glover here, he's not saying anything that's not a fact. These are all facts. What he's implying here, I think, is that there is a dark force behind this that we need to be aware of. And that is a theme that's kind of getting consistent here, is protecting your soul, knowing the value of your life and your soul in particular. There's a YouTube out there called Python Cowboy that makes videos about wrangling snakes. That's what he does for a living. He gets rid of, pretty much anything cold-blooded that people want away from certain areas. He got a contract to clear out one of these old sites that both Jack Parsons and Edward Crowley were associated with way back in the day. What he found out there is just shocking. Take a look at what is taking place at one of these abandoned rocket facilities that these occultists ran.
This facility was actually used to develop and test space rockets during the Cold War by a company called Aerojet. And there's a vast background behind the company. Essentially what happened is during the Cold War, the government and NASA decided to go with a liquid rocket fuel rather than a solid rocket fuel that they were developing. And they cut ties, ended everything, packed up and left, and the facility out in the middle of the Everglades, which was a secret facility, still lays there today. Come to find out, the founder of Aerojet is this public Satanist, possibly even died in a damn satanic ritual. I mean, we're talking sex magic, orgies, sacrifices, all kinds of crazy stuff. Real kind of high society, Illuminati, wild things. And Aerojet all has a tie into it, and there's a deep, dark history. The founder of Aerojet, Jack Parsons, who was the public Satanist, his wife, he claimed he actually conjured her from hell and that she was a demon or an elemental or something. And she was a big part of everything he did and all of his satanic stuff, especially out there at Aerojet. People come out here to do things that they can't do in the city, things they don't want other people to see them do, things that are often illegal or not morally right.
Someone killed it. You could see the heads chopped off.
I was heading out to hunt pythons in an abandoned space rocket facility in the middle of the Everglades. And people go out there to do graffiti, to commit crimes, do gang initiations. Sometimes there's homeless people sleeping out there. I mean, you really never know what you're gonna run into. First corner I bend, turning into the facility, I see a very large rock pile. And on top of that rock pile is a upside down wooden cross. And there's upside down red spray painted crosses all over this rock pile. And there was actually a little doll on the bottom of the rocks. There was a upside down ash cross put on its forehead. And what was really extra odd about this was there was actually a little red corn snake wrapped around the doll when I came up on it, wrapped around its neck. It started to move as I kind of started to approach it, and I did grab it, got a hold of it. Probably one of the stranger things I've come across. This snake wasn't damaged or hurt in any way. I picked it up right off the rocks, and it was actually bleeding from its anus. This snake's maybe about a foot long. And I start making my way deeper up into this building, and there's just more and more stuff I'm seeing, more satanic stuff spray painted on the walls. I actually came across this little room. I mean, there was stuff on the wall talking about sacrificing little
sacrifice.
We gave her to the devil, all kinds of just terrible, terrible stuff. There was actually a little nightgown. I'm sure it was spray painted red, but it was meant to look like blood. Who knows at this point? It could have been. Nailed to the wall in this little room that I couldn't really gain access to. And on the ground was like a sleeping bag with looked like blood on it, and just all kinds of stuff.
What the fuck? That's gross. Yeah, I mean, every part of that is disgusting. It's 2025, so that place has been there for almost 100 years, and there's still some kind of energy drawing these freaks to go there and do this awful, terrible stuff. I mean, even if they're not doing the stuff there, the fact that they're spray painting and bragging about it, upside down crosses, and this is clearly echoes of what was planted, almost a century ago. Super disturbing to me. Maybe not to you, but myself, I find that just out of control and super disturbing. Beck Lover's gonna get a little more into what he thinks is going on with this alien demon thing. Let's take a listen.
Government officials were practicing thelema. That's the name of the faith that they call this, thelema, T-H-E-L-M-A, thelema, or wherever. He wrote a book about the will of man. So it's the opposite of what Muslim means. Muslim means one who submits their will to God.
Mm-hmm.
Their book is about man following their own will, which is what, from the Abrahamic perspective, is when a human being only follows their desires, you are not acting in accordance with the Creator.
Right. And then Satanism is all about worshiping yourself, right?
Because when a human being acts in accordance with the Creator, when they submit their will and not their desire, when you submit your will to God, you suppress your desire and you obey God. When you follow only your desires, you're feeding into what Satanism is all about. So for me, I found it interesting that his book was about the will of just man, like you yourself. It's okay to do whatever you want and be whoever you want. Like, so years and years of these people, their disciples, getting into government positions, they still do these rituals. You've seen plenty of videos online. Why are they dressing up in cloaks, bro?
Right.
Bro, you explain to me why these powerful people all follow this stuff, but the agenda has been to convince humanity that we were created by aliens and not God. I believe they figured a way to open that dimension into our dimension. They preconditioned us with movies. These guys were playing around with these beings to begin with, but they're not aliens, bro. They're demonic. The reason some of them are nice is because, like I told you earlier, they have free will. You might have came across the ones that are actually nice. The ones that are aligned with Satan, they're evil, bro. So people go into these trips, man. I can't mention her name. She was in a big Hollywood movie. She hits me up. She's like, I'm having nightmares. I'm like, what did you do? She's like, I took ayahuasca and I'm just seeing the most horrific nightmares I have ever seen in my life. I cannot sleep. I'm like Freddy Krueger, but she's like terrified to go to sleep. She performed some prayer. I sent her some water to cleanse herself with, to like baptize basically. The next day she slept perfect. She's like, I don't know what you did, but it worked. She like basically cleansed.
Only focus on yourself. Whether you want to call that satanic or not, it certainly is super selfish, and I don't think it makes for a better world. There's more than just ourselves. There's an entire world going on around us of other individuals and their priorities and their lives. And if we only focus on what we want, what's important to us, and what matters right now, which seems to be kind of the theme of Americanism right now, I don't know what kind of a person that makes us. No matter what religion, if any, you believe in, if you believe in no religion and you just want to be a good person, I think that you need to be more conscious of those around you and care more about how what you do affects those around you than looking inwards and just about what you want and what makes you happy. You can call it satanic. Whatever it is, it's not good.
This realm is real, Danny. These people have been worshiping, I believe, and working with these beings for a very long time. This is a demonic agenda to destroy humanity, to make us go, because the devil's always going to make us go against what God made us. God made us beautiful. He made us together. He made us in pairs. I really think that we're towards the end of time. When a human being, out of their own free will, chooses to submit their desires to follow the Creator, they are higher than the angel, because the angel cannot sin. That's why the devil was not a fallen angel. The devil had free will. When a human being acts according to the gift that God gave them, which is intelligence, they are higher than all of creation. We've become zombies, bro, because all we do is follow our desire. When a human being only follows their desires, they are lower than the animals.
No matter if you think Beck Glover is right or not, that's a very good point. When all we care about is what we want, damn, that puts us lower than animals. At least animals, most of them, care about the environment around them and their children. As far as the alien demon thing, what he's saying here is that, you know, you always hear that saying, the biggest trick the devil pulled was to convince the world he didn't exist. And he's flipped that to say the biggest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world he was an alien, meaning if the devil disguises himself as some type of alien, extraterrestrial, with some, you know, super technology, and they have all the answers for us, we just need to fall in line. Well, that's the Judeo-Christian, the Quran, many other religions talk about this, about how when we come towards the end of time, there will be a great deception or a deceiver. Could this alien thing that's been building up for decades, almost a century now, could this alien thing be the deception? Could this be the great deception? I don't know. It's one viewpoint I haven't really thought about too much. Quite frankly, it's terrifying to think about. Tucker Carlson has been criticized for his viewpoint on this, and he's had some experiences himself. Let's listen to Tucker on the Sean Ryan show and also the Joe Rogan podcast here. Check this out. Let me know what you think down in the comments.
I'm usually pretty curious. I've stopped being curious about this because I don't want to know anymore. But
you truly don't want to know anymore about it.
I think I know. I think I know what's up. So I can't prove it, so probably not going to articulate it, but I think I know what's up. Yeah. Well, I think it's a really old story. I think it's a really old story. So that's what I think. But one thing that you notice about every world religion I'm familiar with, I'm interested in that topic. There are commonalities between religions. And one of them, and this is of course true for Christianity, very true, is that the belief that supernatural beings take physical form. That they're not just like some ethereal, they're not just shadows floating around, specters, fog, that they're physical. Like they're as real as the arm of your chair. If every culture in the world that we know about, has left any kind of written or physical record, is reaching the same conclusions about something,
maybe there's something there. And maybe it's not so crazy to think that what everyone else has always thought since the beginning of time, which that there is this combination in cases of, human beings and the spiritual realm, whatever that is. Say that. And so if everybody you talk to is saying, oh, this is really upsetting, I don't know what this means, but here's what I know, here's what I heard someone say, I was in a meeting, or here's what, what I mean? It was that kind of stuff. And I didn't talk to anybody in the UFO community. I'm not even sure what that is or not. So I talked to people who I thought had firsthand knowledge. And I talked to a number of them. And then I was like, whoa, I'm out.
So Tucker, whether told by someone or coming to this conclusion by himself, believes that the extraterrestrial is the same phenomena that many ancient religions and societies have talked about for years, and that they are demonic and after our souls, literally feeding on our souls. Again, back to the soul thing. So if there's one consistent message we're getting from this side of things, it is protect your soul.
So once you get perspective on this question, you're like, okay, that may sound crazy to someone who thinks buying shit on Amazon is the meaning of life, but to every other person in the world, we may disagree about what the truth is. I'm sure we will, but we will never disagree with the fact that there's a lot of shit going on that we cannot see or measure. It's like, there's this debate, like, is this stuff, these phenomena, which are clearly, obviously real? I mean, there's no debate about that. There's a lot of shit that people can't explain in the sky and underwater. We know that. I am really struck. Here's my current thinking on it. The main effort that the U.S. government has put into its disinformation, its lying on this topic, has been not to mislead you on the technology. Like, they're not telling me they don't have anti-gravity technology. It sounds from watching your podcast that they do, which I believe. No problem believing that. Their main interest is in convincing you that the supernatural is not real.
Why is that? Why is the government, at least the folks that we know served in the government at some capacity that are out there now talking about this stuff, it does seem like it's all about technology and recoveries and alien and non-human intelligence, but not any, we're getting nothing officially on an official capacity about anything spiritual. Although you can look through a lot of CIA documents now that have been declassified about Project Stargate and all this remote viewing and tapping into this network, this consciousness, and being able to see things not only in other places, but in different times. And we're going to save that for another episode. Pretty fascinating stuff. I think, Tucker makes a good point here. When they're not talking about it, usually is when maybe there's something to it.
So if they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, like it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but like, what are these things? Are they good or bad? And I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or elements, the people within the U.S. government know that, then they're serving a bad force. And
well, when you say spiritual, like what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it. And, if there's been extensive knowledge of this for decades, like maybe 80 years at least, if not going back to the 30s, 90 years, to what end? So there are two possible explanations, obvious explanations. The first is the one you often hear, which is this is so heavy that if the public were to know about it, it would be just disruptive. It would be too scary. Like, you don't want to scare people for no good reason. There's nothing we can do about it. And you also don't want to suggest that, the U.S. military isn't capable of protecting the country, the homeland. And it does suggest that. If you can't control these objects in your airspace, and that's known, if they can't, that's known, okay? then that suggests a limit to the power of the U.S. military, and you don't want to tell people that because then they won't believe that they're safe. I get it. But then there's a deeper level, which is okay, what's your relationship with these things? What is the U.S. government's relationship with these things? And there's evidence that there is a relationship and that it's a longstanding. And that raises a lot of questions about intent. And so what is that? And I just personally decided, and people have been hurt by these things. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's a knowable fact. It's a provable fact. And killed. An object that is, by definition, supernatural. It's above the laws of nature as we understand them. And that has resulted in the deaths of people. It's that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world that's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. No one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ, but the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. And so to someone born before or living before 1945, I think it would have been much more obvious that this is the thing that every society has written about. And in fact, that battle, that unseen battle around us, that spiritual battle, has been the basis of every society, of every religion, not just Christianity. So it just, once you discard your very, very recent assumptions, relatively speaking, about how the world works, you're well, that kind of seems like the obvious explanation, right?
Damn, the man makes a very good point. There's literally thousands of years of this weird stuff that's been documented, and it's always been attributed to some type of spiritual realm. I don't think they had the terms 3,000 years ago for UFOs, but we do see some very interesting artifacts from some of these ancient civilizations pointing towards something either extraterrestrial or interdimensional, but what they believed was spiritual, either God or demigod or a god with bad intent, which was definitely a thing. If you look into the Old Testament of the Bible, God basically says that there are other gods. It's just that he is the one true God. But there is acknowledgement that there are other gods with powers on the face of this earth. It gets really interesting. Maybe this is just our interpretation, like Tucker's saying. Since we've split the atom, it's all about technology and innovation. That's what, I don't know about the entire world, but a big part of our species, especially in American culture, is that next big thing, that next innovation. And it almost always has to do with technology. So are we interpreting these beings the best way our brain knows how instead of what they actually are? It's a really interesting thought experiment, and it's one that I have thought about a lot lately. I've had a couple of long nights considering it. So I don't think Tucker Carlson is crazy for proposing this, and I don't think Beck Lover is crazy for proposing this. And in fact, there's a whole faction of folks that are proposing this and believe that this is what's going on. As you've heard, even in our own Pentagon. So what do we make of that, folks? Leave a comment below. Tell me what your thoughts are. What do you think? Now we're going to wrap this up with a really crazy experience that Tucker Carlson had. What he references as a demonic experience. Found this on YouTube, but I thought it was relevant. I don't discredit it. I think that if anything, maybe this experience has helped him plug into what he believes to be the truth behind all this weirdness that's been happening lately. So, with judgment-free eyes, take a look at this.
Oh yeah, I had a direct experience with it.
In the milieu of journalism, or just...
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep with my wife and 4 dogs in the bed and mauled. Physically mauled.
In a spiritual attack by a demon?
Yeah, by a demon. Or by something unseen that left...
Is that right?
Claw marks on my sides, on my...
So it left physical marks?
Oh, they're still there.
Was your wife terrified? I know you were.
I wasn't. I was totally confused. I woke up and I couldn't breathe, and I thought I was going to suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in, and my wife and dogs had not woken up, and they're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder.
That sounded absolutely terrifying. It seems like folks that have experiences like that all of a sudden tend to have more experiences. Does that plug them into something that is just a little bit higher level than the rest of us can understand? Like if you look at the Whitley Strieber case, it seems like, you know, just crazier and crazier stuff starts happening the more and more he opens himself up to it. It reminds me of something this old pastor used to say to everyone, but it spoke to me, which was, you hear a lot about spirituality and folks being spiritual. You have to be careful, though, about what spirits you're letting in. I think when we talk about when we started this episode with Matthew Brown, talking about this entire hidden power that is really driving things behind the scenes, that is evil. Whether you want to call it the Judeo-Christian satanic evil or just straight being bad people evil, it's evil. And some of the motivations behind some of these stories, like hiding science, derailing science, a legitimate scientist like Eric Weinstein having to go on essentially a rampage because he keeps running into these brick walls of folks either denying or playing dumb or bullying you out because you don't go along with the narrative. That's not science. That's a cult. That's what that is. Or a religion, you know, whichever you want to call it. So that's something we should all be paying attention to. These are all things we should all be paying attention to. We're being misled about what the UFO UAPs are. We're being misled about science. We're being lied to and manipulated about what information is out there. We're being told straight up the AI will be controlled. The AI will be under government control, and whoever runs it will be up to the government. We're seeing just more and more manipulation and more control over our daily lives and our freedoms. That is scary. That is what I call evil. Demonic or not, are aliens demonic? I don't know. I don't know. I will just say be careful about what you open yourself up to. I know I will be, especially after watching a lot of this stuff. Thank you to all of these podcasters going out there and taking risks by doing these interviews. We all learned so much from them that we just don't get on the mainstream news because they're too busy barking at each other over silly wedge issues that really don't impact us that much. Keep your eyes open. Be aware. Thank you for watching this episode of Gabriel Speaks. I'll see you the next time.